Well, good evening. I have no clue what it is this time. We didn't update the software, but and I checked the stream key character for character. It matches. Sometimes it will connect, and my software will say it's connected, but Facebook won't accept it and show it to me. And then sometimes my software says it can't connect. So I don't know what's going on, and so we're just going to go ahead and record this and upload it. It gets it up late. I apologize for that. I don't know why these things keep happening to us. If it keeps going on like this, we may have to go back to pre-recording. Not what I really wanted to do, but so be it. The software's not going to work. Software's not going to work. We'll figure out some way around it. Anyway, this is our Friday night Bible study for Friday, July 25, 2025. So the day and the year are the same right now. I had me thinking. I even tried to look some of these up. When I was, I would have been 22 at the time, just before I started college. We had a very unusually similar day, and that would have been July the 7th, or 7/7 of 1977. 7777. 7 is considered by a lot of people to be a lucky number, and by that time Michigan did have a pick 3 lottery. And I tried to look this up and get confirmation of it, but I heard it on the news at the time, that the computers for the Michigan lottery quit selling tickets with the number 777 because too many people had already bought it, and the computers were programmed to only allow so many tickets with the same number in case that number happened to be drawn. Now, as I recall, I tried to look it up, and the online records for the Michigan Lottery only go back to about 1987. So I couldn't look up what number won on 7777. But I recall that it was not 777. So a lot of people bet that number and didn't win anything. No, so be it. That's life, I guess. And I now have a new answer to the joke question, how hot was it? Yeah, it is July. It is now very much the middle of summer. We live in a southern state, and that means that in the summertime it can get quite hot. And maybe you're familiar with the little liner that goes, how hot was it? It was so hot that, and then you insert your punchline of whatever it was. So
I saw an attorney with his hands in his own pocket.
that's how cold it was, wasn't it?
So cold.
Yeah, well, okay.
Are you under the opinion that you're streaming?
No, I am not. I can't stream. I'm having to pre-record and upload. My software will not go online tonight. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's not streamed.
No, it won't go through. Now, sometimes the software will say it's gotten through, but Facebook won't admit that it's coming. And sometimes the software won't even get through. I tried several times, so I just gave up and said, okay, we're going to record and upload. So that's what we're doing here. Anyway, my version of that now is, how hot was it? It was so hot I couldn't kneel on the wooden deck without burning my knees. Now you might wonder, how do I know that? Well, I think I mentioned a month or so back, maybe a couple of months back, that I'd gone to the store and I'd bought a gallon of wood protector to recoat of the deck behind our house. And so I got out the other day and decided to try and use it. And the first thing I did was I did the railing all the way around the deck, the top of the rail. And I got that all done, and it was, by the time I got to the other side, it was already dry where I started. Then I got down on my hands and knees and started doing the deck itself. And I started right up against the house, which had seen less sunlight because the deck is on the west side of our house. So when the sun comes up, it doesn't shine on the deck until as it gets close to noon, then it starts shining on the outside of the deck, and it works its way towards the house as the sun moves farther to the west. So the farther I got to the west on that porch, the hotter the wood got. I came in, I looked for some knee pads, I couldn't find them right away, so I just sealed up the paint can, and maybe we'll try and do that some morning before the sun gets on that side of the house. Maybe we can get it done that way. And then after we're done, we can come inside, the sun will come out and dry the paint real thoroughly. And the coat, it's not really paint. But anyway.
You probably forgot that several years back, the HVAC man went to open that door and was repelled by the heat coming off that door. And he said to put a piece of foam board up against that door.
And we did have some foam board up against that door for a while.
Yeah, we did.
I suppose we'd get some more foam board and cut it to the right size and tape it to the door. But yeah, it does, in the afternoon it can get hot on that side of the house. I hadn't been aware that wood could get that hot, but obviously it can. So, well, last week we finished 2 Kings and started in 1 Chronicles, and I told you then that we were going to go through the books of Chronicles rather quickly, pausing only to note where they differ from the accounts that we read in Samuel. And a lot of what we went through, because we went through, I know we went through at least 9 chapters. We might have gone through 11. But at any rate, in fact, I think we got chapter 12, because I spent some time this evening just before we started recording, when I intended to go live, comparing what's written in 1 Chronicles 12 to what's written in 2 Samuel 23, which is the story or the listing of David's 30 warriors. And the lists are very similar. The list in Chronicles is longer, and there are a few people that it leaves out. And what's interesting to me is that one of the people that Chronicles leaves out is Eliam, son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite. Ahithophel, as you may know, was an older man who sided with Absalom when Absalom tried to usurp his dad's place on the throne. And when David's ally, Hushai, made a show of joining Absalom in order to defeat Ahithophel's advice, and when Absalom took Hushai's advice and ignored Ahithophel's advice, Ahithophel could read the tea leaves. He was a smart man. That's why he was considered such a great advisor. He could read the tea leaves. He went home, set his affairs in order, and killed himself. Eliam, his son, was Bathsheba's father. And of course, you know Bathsheba is the wife of Uriah the Hittite, whom David had killed after trying to cover up his affair with Bathsheba. And Bathsheba then became the mother of Solomon and the first queen mother in the country of Judea. And if he's left out, well, we'll look at some other instances, but I get the impression that the authors of these books of Chronicles, and we know that these books were written after the exile in Babylon, and the similarities between them and the subsequent books of Ezra and Nehemiah lead us to believe that Ezra may have had a hand in getting these books put together. At least people affiliated with him probably did it. And when you look at how they treat the stories of the kings of Judah, you get the impression that they were seeking to do a little bit of whitewashing. And we'll look at a few specific instances and see things that are different in the stories in Chronicles from the way they are given in the books of Samuel and Kings, and see why I tend to believe that. At any rate, I forgot to turn the other light on here. Let me go do that real quick. It'll make the lighting better here. And let's bow our heads and we'll get started. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for your written word. And we thank you for the evidence we have that the written word can lead us to the living word, to Jesus Christ, through whom Jesus said we could obtain eternal life. We want to come to Jesus Christ that we might obtain this eternal life. We want to see your character reflected in Jesus Christ, and we want that character then to be lived out in our own lives through the power of the Spirit. Send the Spirit to each one who listens to this presentation, we ask. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, now I started playing around with transitions here. I didn't find the kind of transition I wanted, but I did find this one, and I changed the timing on it because I thought it would look nicer with a different timing. But then the other transitions that I had also had that same timing change. I didn't like that, so I changed it back. So that's what I came up with. Yeah, it probably looks funny, but anyway, it didn't. What I really wanted to do was to just have that full camera view shrink up into the corner in a single move. This software doesn't do more complicated things like that, apparently. At least I haven't figured it out. Maybe somebody knows how it's done, and I can look it up sometime and figure it out and do it. But I'm reading out of 1 Chronicles 12, and I think that's about where we left off, because I remember searching the list of David's mighty men, or his 30, as they're called here. It says the following men joined David at Ziklag. Well, now, wait a minute. That was actually in chapter 11. I went through that. But I think we did through that. Yeah, the three, and this only names two of the three, Jashobeam the Hakamite and Eleazar the son of Dodai. And then it starts listing the 30 mighty men, and then it goes, and it gives a little additional information about some of them. For example, here in 22, there was also Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He became Solomon's enforcer. A valiant warrior from Kabzeel, he did many heroic deeds, which included killing 2 champions of Moab. Another time, on a snowy day, he chased a lion down into a pit and killed it. We had a preacher here once made a whole sermon out of that little snippet of information. I forget what point he was making, but he did use that. Made a whole sermon out of it. Once, armed only with a club, he killed an Egyptian warrior who was 7.5 feet tall and who was armed with a spear as thick as a weaver's beam. Benaiah wrenched the spear from the Egyptian's hand and killed him with it. Deeds like these made Benaiah as famous as the 3 mightiest warriors. He was more honored than the other members of the 30, though he was not one of the 3. And David made him captain of his bodyguard. So he kind of continued that role into the reign of Solomon. David's mighty warriors also included, and we have this list. And I was telling you, I just went through and compared this list to the list in 2 Samuel. This list is longer, and as I said, while Uriah the Hittite is mentioned in this list here at verse 41, Eliam, the son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite, is left out and is not mentioned. Now, it says the following men joined David at Ziklag while he was hiding from Saul, son of Kish. They were among the warriors who fought beside David in battle. All of them were expert archers, and they could shoot arrows or sling stones with their left hand as well as their right, ambidextrous. They were all relatives of Saul from the tribe of Benjamin. Their leader was Ahiezer, son of Shemaiah from Gibeah. His brother Joash was second in command. These were the other warriors, and then it gives a list of a number of them here. Some brave and experienced warriors from the tribe of Gad also defected to David while he was at the stronghold in the wilderness. They were expert with both shield and spear, as fierce as lions and as swift as deer on the mountains. And it gives a list of Ezer and Obadiah and Eliab and Mishmana and Jeremiah and Attai and Eliel, Johanan, Elzabad, Jeremiah the 10th, and Macbanai the 11th. These warriors from Gad were army commanders. The weakest among them could take on 100 regular troops, and the strongest could take on 1,000. Well, that's probably a bit of an exaggeration, but these were mighty men. These were the men who crossed the Jordan River during its seasonal flooding at the beginning of the year and drove out all the people living in the lowlands on both the east and west banks. Others from Benjamin and Judah came to David at the stronghold. David went out to meet them and said, "If you have come in peace to help me, we are friends. But if you have come to betray me to my enemies when I am innocent, then may the God of our ancestors see it and punish you." Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, the leader of the 30, and he said, "We are yours, David. We are on your side, son of Jesse. Peace and prosperity be with you, and success to all who help you. For your God is the one who helps you." This is typical Hebrew poetic speech. And if someone waxed eloquent and poetic in speech, they would say that the Spirit came upon them. So David let them join him, and he made them officers over his troops. And of course, if you read this in the books of Samuel, it kind of says that everybody who was in trouble with Saul would come and join David, or if they owed debts and were in some way in trouble with the administration of Saul, these malcontents came and joined David. So they wasn't dressed up quite as pretty there. Some men from Manasseh defected from the Israelite army and joined David when he set out with the Philistines to fight against Saul. But as it turned out, the Philistine rulers refused to let David and his men go with them. After much discussion, they sent them back, for they said, "It will cost us our heads if David switches loyalties to Saul and turns against us." And then it gives us a list of the men from Manasseh who defected to David as he was returning to Ziklag. Each commanded 1,000 troops from the tribe of Manasseh to help David chase down bands of raiders, for they were all brave and able warriors who became commanders in his army. Day after day, more men joined David until he had a great army, like the army of God. They would have called the Israelite army the army of God. I mean, that's how they thought. These are the numbers of armed warriors who joined David at Hebron. They were all eager to see David become king instead of Saul, just as the Lord had promised. And then it starts giving us numbers from the different tribes. How many from each tribe? 120,000 troops from the east side of the Jordan River, Reuben, Gad, the half-tribe of Manasseh. All these men came in battle array to Hebron with the single purpose of making David the king over all Israel. In fact, everyone in Israel agreed that David should be their king. They feasted and drank with David for 3 days, for preparations had been made by their relatives for their arrival. And people from as far away as Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali brought food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen. Vast supplies of flour, fig cakes, clusters of raisins, wine, olive oil, cattle, sheep, and goats were brought to the celebration. There was great joy throughout the land of Israel. And so David becomes king. And next we read in chapter 13 here, David attempts to move the ark. David consulted with all his officials, including the generals and captains of his army. Apparently, he didn't address the priests at this point. And then he addressed the entire assembly of Israel as follows: "If you approve, and if it is the will of the Lord our God, let us send messages to all the Israelites throughout the land, including the priests and Levites in their towns and pasture lands. Let us invite them to come and join us. It is time to bring back the ark of our God, for we neglected it during the reign of Saul." Recall that prior to the time that Saul became king, during the days when Samuel was still a young man, the Philistines had captured the ark. They found out they couldn't keep it, they sent it back, and it got left where it arrived in Israel for quite a number of years. And you may recall the story of David fleeing from Saul and going to the tent of the house of God, although the ark probably was not there at that time. It was where it had come back from Philistia. The whole assembly agreed to this, for the people could see it was the right thing to do. So David summoned all Israel from the Shihor brook of Egypt in the south, all the way to the town of Lebo Hamath in the north, to join in bringing the ark of God from Kiriath Jearim. Then David and all Israel went to Baalah of Judah, also called Kiriath Jearim, to bring the ark of God, which bears the name of the Lord, who is enthroned between the cherubim. Footnote B on name there, or the ark of God, where the name is proclaimed, the name, or Yahweh, or the character of God, because that's what the name represented. They placed the ark of God on a new cart. Recall that the Philistines had loaded the ark onto a cart and put some freshly calved cows on it, and they led it, lowing as they went, back to Israel. So, based on that history, it may have seemed logical to David to use a cart to bear the ark back to where he wanted to set up the house of God in Jerusalem. So they did this. They brought it from Abinadab's house. Uzzah and Ahiah were guiding the cart. David and all Israel were celebrating before God with all their might, singing songs and playing all kinds of musical instruments, lyres, harps, tambourines, cymbals, and trumpets. But when they arrived at the threshing floor of Nacon, the oxen stumbled, and Uzzah reached out his hand to steady the ark. Then the Lord's anger was aroused against Uzzah, and he struck him dead because he had laid his hand on the ark. So Uzzah died there in the presence of God. Now, we talked about this when we read this story in the book of Samuel, and we suggested that because of the Hebrew conception that if it happened, God did it, then if Uzzah died at this point, their interpretation would be that God did it. And it caused David to be worried. It says here David was angry because the Lord's anger had burst out against Uzzah. He named that place Perez Uzzah, which means to burst out against Uzzah, as it is still called today. Was he angry at God? Well, if he thought God did it, he might have been. David was not afraid of God, and he asked, "How can I ever bring the ark of God back into my care?" So David did not move the ark into the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom of Gath. The ark of God remained there in Obed-Edom's house for 3 months, and the Lord blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he owned. Now we go on chapter 14. Then King Hiram of Tyre sent messengers to David along with cedar timber and stonemasons and carpenters to build him a palace. And David realized that the Lord had confirmed him as king over Israel and had greatly blessed his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. Then David married more wives in Jerusalem, and they had more sons and daughters. These are the names of David's sons who were born in Jerusalem: Shemua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Elpalet, Nogah, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphalet. That's quite a list of names. And most of those, except for Solomon and Nathan, are almost entirely ignored from this point on. Now, I think you'll find, and let me look that up real quick, that when Luke traces the ancestry of Jesus back all the way to Adam, that when he goes backwards, and yes, he does, and I'm going to just pick up at verse 31. This is in Luke chapter 3. The son of Meliah, the son of Menah, the son of Mattatha, the son of Nathan, the son of David, the son of Jesse. Now, from David backwards, it follows the standard patriarchal lineage. But up until that point, we believe that Luke was following a matriarchal lineage, and that's why he traces the line of Jesus back through Nathan instead of through Solomon, as the more traditional patriarchal accounts would render it. When the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over all Israel, they mobilized all their forces to capture him. But David was told they were coming, so he marched out to meet them. The Philistines arrived and made a raid in the valley of Rephaim. So David asked God, should I go out to fight the Philistines? Will you hand them over to me? The Lord replied, or at least that's what they imagined, yes, go ahead, I will hand them over to you. So David and his troops went up to Baal Perazim and defeated the Philistines there. God did it, David exclaimed. He used me to burst through my enemies like a raging flood. So they named that place Baal Perazim, which means the Lord who bursts through. Remember that Perez Uzzah was the name used before. That Perez is the breaking through. The Philistines had abandoned their gods there, so David gave orders to burn them. But after a while, the Philistines returned and raided the valley again. And again David asked God what to do. Do not attack them straight on, God replied. Instead, circle around behind and attack near the poplar trees. When you hear a sound like marching feet in the tops of the poplar trees, go out and attack. That will be the signal that God is moving ahead of you to strike down the Philistine army. So David did what God commanded, and they struck down the Philistine army all the way from Gibeon to Gezer. Did God protect his people when they went to battle? Well, there's a passage in the New Testament which talks about how God winked at the times of their ignorance. So if they ignorantly assume that God does these things, then if God moves to protect them, watching out, winking, so to speak, at their ignorance, then they might well have pictured that as God fighting for them and destroying the enemy on their behalf. So David's fame spread everywhere, and the Lord caused all the nations to fear David. Moving on, chapter 15. David now built several buildings for himself in the city of David. He also prepared a place for the ark of God and set up a special tent for it. Then he commanded, no one except the Levites may carry the ark of God. The Lord has chosen them to carry the ark of the Lord and to serve him forever. Maybe by this time he had talked with some people trying to figure out why this thing with Uzzah had happened. So now we read on, and he found out that yes, only the Levites were to carry the ark. It was not to be carried on a cart. It was not to be touched. Then David summoned all Israel to Jerusalem to bring the ark of the Lord to the place he had prepared for it. This is the number of the descendants of Aaron the priest and the Levites who were called together. From the clan of Kohath, 120 with Uriel as their leader. From the clan of Merari, 220 with Asaiah as their leader. And from the clan of Gershom, the three main branches of the tribe of Levi, 130 with Joel as their leader. But then it also mentions Elizaphan, Hebron, Uzziel, also with more men and leaders. Then David summoned the priests, Zadok and Abiathar, and these Levite leaders, Uriel, Asaiah, Joel, Shemaiah, Eliel, and Aminadab. He said to them, "You are the leaders of the Levite families. You must purify yourselves and all your fellow Levites, so you can bring the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to the place I have prepared for it. Because your Levites did not carry the ark the first time, the anger of the Lord our God burst out against us. We failed to ask God how to move it properly." Now this is getting into a little more of a moralistic approach to things, which is what you will find in the account kept by the prophets in a contemporary nature. There is some moralistic rendering of things. Well, this happened because blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, it just tells what happened. In the books of Chronicles, we're more likely to read things like this. Well, this happened because this or that or the other. Because you Levites did not carry the ark the first time, the anger of the Lord our God burst out against us. We failed to ask God how to move it properly. So the priests and the Levites purified themselves in order to bring the ark of the Lord, the God of Israel, to Jerusalem. Then the Levites carried the ark of God on their shoulders with its carrying poles, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. In other words, they didn't do their research. It's kind of interesting. I was about to say that about somebody who posted some court video on YouTube. This particular video is of a judge, Judge Wolf, that I'm familiar with because I've seen a number of his other cases, and I've looked up the places mentioned. He is a judge in Dickson County, Tennessee. Now there is a town of Dickson in Tennessee. It's west of Nashville, about 30 miles, and it is in the county of Dickson, but the Charlotte, Tennessee is the county seat. And but it's not spelled like you might think. It's spelled Dickson. 7 letters instead of the 5 letters of Dixon that is most often used for Dixon. Now, the funny thing about this event was that the defendant in the case, it was a request for an order of protection, temporary order of protection, or a TOP. We sometimes call it temporary protective order, or a TPO in other states. But at any rate, he was the defendant. His name was David Dickson, Dixon. And his wife of about 20 years, they'd been in a relationship for 27 years, was leaving him. And according to him, he had helped her start a tree service with links to the utility company so that they would get jobs when there were storms and the utility companies needed trees cleared out from around their lines. This company could come do it. And he told the judge that he had helped set all those things up. And it was known as Dickson Tree Service, LLC. And the guy who put the video up spelled it Dixon because that's what he heard, and he didn't know any better. He didn't do the research. Well, while I was watching, I did the research. So I looked up Dickson Tree Service in Tennessee. And I came up with a place out in eastern Tennessee, almost to North Carolina, a little south of a little town called Greenville, with an extra E in it, Greeneville, Greenville, Tennessee. Well, that didn't seem likely because, as I noted, Dickson, Tennessee is west of Nashville, not way off east. So I said, I'm not sure that's it. I kept listening to it, and I said, well, now wait a minute. Tree service in Dickson County. So I looked that up, and I found a Dickson, Dickson tree service. And I looked up their website and loaded it up, and it actually named the plaintiff in the case, the wife, as the owner of the company. So, well, okay, this is obviously it. And it is not spelled Dixon like the name of her husband. It's spelled Dickson like the name of the town and the county. And I won't go into the rest of the story, but she was complaining that he was trying to destroy the business, and he was like, "Wow, it's my business. I own it. I made it work." It was a bunch of craziness. At any rate, so what I'm saying here is that David failed to do his research when he decided he wanted to bring the ark to Jerusalem. So now he's done it. So now he's going to again try this. And we just read verse 15 where it says the Levites carried the ark of God on their shoulders with its carrying poles, just as the Lord had instructed Moses. David also ordered the Levite leaders to appoint a choir of Levites who were singers and musicians to sing joyful songs to the accompaniment of harps, lyres, and cymbals. So the Levites appointed Heman, son of Joel, along with his fellow Levites, Asaph, son of Berechiah, and Ethan, son of Cushiah, I think it is actually, from the clan of Merari. The following men were chosen as their assistants: Zechariah, Jaziel, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Uni, Eliah, Benaiah, Maaseiah, Mattathiah, Eliphahu, Elphelahu, I think. Sure. I have a tough time with some of these names. Micniah, and the gatekeepers, Obed-Edom and Jael. The musicians were Heman, Asaph, and Ethan. These musicians were chosen to sound the bronze cymbals. Zechariah, Aziel, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Uni, Eliah, Messiah, and Benaiah were chosen to play the harps. Mattathiah, Eliphalu, Eliphalahu. I have to work on that one. Micniah, Obed-Edom, Jael, Azaziah were chosen to play the lyres. Caniah, the head Levite, was chosen as the choir leader because of his skill. So they were providing a lot of music along with everything else. Berechiah and Elkanah were chosen to guard the ark. Shebaniah, Joshaphat, Nethanel, Amasai, Zechariah, Benaiah, and Eleazar, all of whom were priests, were chosen to blow the trumpets as they marched in front of the ark of God. Obed-Edom and Jehiah were chosen to guard the ark. Now, didn't it say earlier that Obed-Edom was the one whose house it was in? I'm going to have to turn here. Where am I? I'm in 1 Chronicles 15, so that would have been in chapter 14. Yeah, Obed-Edom. The ark remained in his house. So now it's probably the same Obed-Edom, although it doesn't say so explicitly, now involved in bringing it to Jerusalem. Then David and the elders of Israel and the generals of the army went to the house of Obed-Edom to bring the ark of the Lord's covenant up to Jerusalem with a great celebration. And because God was clearly helping the Levites as they carried the ark of the Lord's covenant, they sacrificed 7 bulls and 7 rams. David was dressed in a robe of fine linen, as were all the Levites who carried the ark, and also the singers and Caniah the choir leader. David was also wearing a priestly garment, or an ephod, I think it'll say, footnote G, a linen ephod. So all Israel brought up the ark of the Lord's covenant with shouts of joy, the blowing of ram's horns and trumpets, the crashing of cymbals, and loud playing on harps and lyres. But as the ark of the Lord's covenant entered the city of David, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw King David skipping about and laughing with joy, she was filled with contempt for him. And we talked about this when we read the story in the book of Samuel, or the books of Samuel, when we read that David had had her brought back again to be his wife, taking her away from the man that Saul had given her to after David vanished. But now she has decided she doesn't like David as much as she did when Saul gave her to David. They brought the ark of God and placed it beside the special tent David had prepared for it. They presented burnt offerings and peace offerings to God. When he had finished his sacrifices, David blessed the people in the name of the Lord. He then gave to every man and woman in all Israel a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins. David appointed the following Levites to lead the people in worship before the ark of the Lord, to invoke his blessings, to give thanks, and to praise the Lord, the God of Israel. Asaph, the leader of this group, sounded the cymbals. Second to him was Zechariah, followed by Jael, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Mathiah, Eliah, Benaiah, Obed-Edom, and Jael.
I say something.
What?
Well, I'm going back to Michael.
Yeah.
And her turnabout, her feelings about David. I'm projecting myself into her shoes, wondering why she would have done that complete turnabout about the way she was feeling about him. And the answer to that question that I've heard other people say is that she felt like David had demeaned himself by acting the part of a commoner.
Well,
But
that's...
there might be a little bit more to it. She was the daughter of a king, a princess. She was spoiled. She had the audacity to talk back to David and tell him what she thought. Where women of that day were not encouraged, shall we say, their husbands in the way that she may have felt free to speak to him.
I thought you were going to say that she felt used and abused by being sent off to be the wife of one man and then being brought back later to be David's wife. Used just...
Her dad.
What?
That's on her dad.
Well, her being brought back wasn't on her dad. That was on David.
The other man was on her dad.
Well, yeah, that was. But
There may have been a lot of jealousies there because she was not sharing him with all these women.
well, not at first, no. She was his only wife. Now
Yeah.
she gets brought back from up north, and she's one of, who knows? There's at least 6 at that point in time, but probably more.
And she may have been the spoiled little princess, got everything she wanted. So she's not happy that she's having to share her husband. She's got the audacity to speak up and tell him what she thinks. There may have been a little bit more humanity involved in that than, by humanity, I mean human emotions, jealousy and anger.
And
What?
just feeling manipulated and put upon and powerless to some extent because the men in her life decided what would happen to her.
Yeah.
And she didn't have a whole lot of agency in the whole thing. Now, I was about to comment. We're reading about these men, and Asaph and what was the other name here? He was in the previous chapter. There was another name besides Asaph. These names are commonly found in the book of Psalms. So these men had a part in preparing the songs of Israel, because that's what the book of Psalms is, really, the songs of Israel. And we know that David wrote a lot, but definitely not all, of what we find in the book of Psalms. And now we're going to read that David did, in fact, write some specifically for this event. On that day, verse 7 here says, David gave to Asaph and his fellow Levites this song of thanksgiving to the Lord. Give thanks to the Lord and proclaim his greatness. Let the whole world know what he has done. Sing to him. Yes, sing his praises. Tell everyone about his wonderful deeds. Exalt in his holy name. Rejoice, you who worship the Lord. Search for the Lord and for his strength. Continually seek him. Remember the wonders he has performed, his miracles, and the rulings he has given. You, children of his servant Israel, you descendants of Jacob, his chosen ones. He is Yahweh, our God. His justice is seen throughout the land. Remember his covenant forever, the commitment he made to 1,000 generations. This is the covenant he made with Abraham, and the oath he swore to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob as a decree, and to the people of Israel as a never-ending covenant. I will give you the land of Canaan as your special possession. He said this when you were few in number, a tiny group of strangers in Canaan. They wandered from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another. Yet he did not let anyone oppress them. He warned kings on their behalf, do not touch my chosen people, and do not hurt my prophets. Let the whole earth sing to the Lord. Each day proclaim the good news that he saves. Publish his glorious deeds among the nations. Tell everyone about the amazing things he does. Great is the Lord. He is most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. The gods of other nations are mere idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Honor and majesty surround him. Strength and joy fill his dwelling. O nations of the world, recognize the Lord. Recognize that the Lord is glorious and strong. Give to the Lord the glory he deserves. Bring your offering and come into his presence. Worship the Lord in all his holy splendor. Let all the earth tremble before him. The world stands firm and cannot be shaken. Let the heavens be glad and the earth rejoice. Tell all the nations, the Lord reigns. Let the sea and everything in it shout his praise. Let the fields and their crops burst out with joy. Let the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord. Clearly poetic language here because we're using anthropomorphism, talking about crops singing. Let the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for he is coming to judge the earth. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His faithful love endures forever. Cry out, save us, O God of our salvation. Gather and rescue us from among the nations so we can thank your holy name and rejoice and praise you. Praise the Lord, the God of Israel, who lives from everlasting to everlasting. And all the people shouted, Amen, and praised the Lord. Now, I wanted to see if this would tell us in the footnotes, and it doesn't, if this is repeated from one of the Psalms. It may not be. I didn't take time to look that up. Let's see if my NIV says anything about it. Well, this mentions Psalms 105. Let me look at that real quick. Well, yeah. Well, it starts out kind of like Psalm 105. Then it gets into history that's not reproduced here. So, okay. So at least part of it is reproduced in Psalm 105. David arranged for Asaph and his fellow Levites to serve regularly before the Ark of the Lord's Covenant, doing whatever needed to be done each day. This group included Obed-Edom, son of Jeduthun, Hosa, and 68 other Levites as gatekeepers. Meanwhile, David stationed Zadok the priest and his fellow priests at the tabernacle of the Lord at the place of worship in Gibeon, where they continued to minister before the Lord. Now recall, this was one of the high places. And while the ark was now at Jerusalem, the tabernacle was still at Gibeon, and that's where Solomon went early in his reign, as we read back there in 1 Kings. They sacrificed the regular burnt offerings to the Lord each morning and evening on the altar set aside for that purpose, obeying everything written in the law of the Lord as he had commanded Israel. David also appointed Heman, Jeduthun, and the others chosen by name to give thanks to the Lord, for his faithful love endures forever. They used their trumpets, cymbals, and other instruments to accompany their songs of praise to God, or to accompany the sacred music, or to accompany singing to God. And the sons of Jeduthun were appointed as gatekeepers. Then all the people returned to their homes, and David turned and went home to bless his own family. Moving on. When David was settled in his palace, he summoned Nathan the prophet. "Look," David said, "I am living in a beautiful cedar palace, but the ark of the Lord's covenant is out there under a tent." Nathan replied to David, "Do whatever you have in mind, for God is with you." Now, here is a case where I think we've got pretty clear evidence that the prophets could at times speak on their own. Because here's the prophet Nathan, who served David, and he tells David, "Do whatever you have in mind," and tells David God is, well, yeah, God was with David because David was with God, as we've discussed before. But that same night, God said to Nathan, "Nathan, before you open your mouth, maybe you should engage certain other mechanisms. Go and tell my servant David, this is what the Lord has declared. You are not the one to build a house for me to live in. I have never lived in a house from the day I brought the Israelites out of Egypt until this very day. My home has always been a tent, moving from place to another in a tabernacle. Yet no matter where I have gone with the Israelites, I have never once complained to Israel's leaders, the shepherds of my people. I have never asked them, 'Why haven't you built me a beautiful cedar house?' Now, go and say to my servant David, this is what the Lord of heaven's armies has declared. I took you from tending sheep in the pasture and selected you to be the leader of my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have destroyed all your enemies before your eyes." Well, that's how David would have seen it anyway. "Now I will make your name as famous as anyone who has ever lived on the earth, and I will provide a homeland for my people Israel, planting them in a secure place where they will never be disturbed. Evil nations won't oppress them, as they've done in the past, starting from the time I appointed judges to rule my people Israel. And I will defeat all your enemies. Furthermore, I declare that the Lord will build a house for you, a dynasty of kings. For when you die and join your ancestors, I will raise up one of your descendants, one of your sons, and I will make his kingdom strong. He is the one who will build a house, a temple for me, and I will secure his throne forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. I will never take my favor from him, as I took it from the one who ruled before you. I will confirm him as king over all my house and my kingdom for all time, and his throne will be secure forever." So Nathan went back to David and told him everything the Lord had said in this vision. Then King David went in and sat before the Lord and prayed, "Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? And now, O God, in addition to everything else, you speak of giving your servant a lasting dynasty. You speak as though I were someone very great, O Lord God." Meaning of Hebrew is uncertain on that great. All right. "What more can I say to you about the way you have honored me? You know what your servant is really like. For the sake of your servant, O Lord, and according to your will, you have done all these great things and have made them known. O Lord, there is no one like you. We have never even heard of another God like you. What other nation on earth is like your people Israel? What other nation, O God, have you redeemed from slavery to be your own people? You made a great name for yourself when you redeemed your people from Egypt. You performed awesome miracles and drove out the nations that stood in their way. You chose Israel to be your very own people forever, and you, O Lord, became their God. Now, at this point, I'd like to just pause and talk a little bit about the symbolic nature of Israel, the metaphorical nature of Israel, and their history as a type or metaphor or symbol for the journey of individual people from our natural human condition to a relationship with the Creator. And it begins, as did the history of Israel, with reclamation from slavery. We are born as humans, slaves to sin. You see what the New Testament says about that. And we cannot escape it on our own. All the things we do, even once we recognize the problem, all the things we do to try to fix it, turn out to be counterproductive, and we end up worse off than we were when we started. So we need divine help to escape that slavery, but that is only the beginning. You know, a lot of people who have had addiction problems and who have overcome those addiction problems through a relationship with the Creator. We'll say it that way, even though that may not always be the case. We'll sometimes talk as if they've gotten there. They've done this thing. No, you've only started at that point. Once you overcome your addictions, that's the beginning point. Now you've got all the rest of the history of Israel to live out in your own life, to draw closer to the Creator and to better understand His character, so that that character can then be recreated in your own character as you learn to trust the God revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. And now, O Lord, I am your servant. Do as you have promised concerning me and my family. May it be a promise that will last forever. And we've talked about this, that lasting forever doesn't take place through David's physical line, except as Jesus was born in that line. And Jesus then becomes the head of God's people for all eternity. And in that sense, then God does in fact fulfill this promise that He makes to David, that he will have a lasting dynasty. But it won't be through human means. It'll be through divine means. Excuse me. And may your name be established and honored forever, so that everyone will say, the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, is Israel's God. And may the house of your servant David continue before you forever. Oh my God, I have been bold enough to pray to you, because you have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him, a dynasty of kings. For you are God, O Lord, and you have promised these good things to your servant. And now it has pleased you to bless the house of your servant, so that it will continue forever before you. For when you grant a blessing, O Lord, it is an eternal blessing. And some time back, as we read the story of Athaliah and her attempt to wipe out the line of David and replace it with her own, then we see God intervening through the wife of the priest, as we will read later in Chronicles, to maintain His promise to David, and how in the days of Manasseh that we read fairly recently, he didn't totally reject the line of David even then, despite Manasseh's wickedness, for sake of this promise to David. For when you grant a blessing, O Lord, it is an eternal blessing. Moving on, next chapter. After this, David defeated and subdued the Philistines by conquering Gath and its surrounding towns. David also conquered the land of Moab, and the Moabites who were spared became David's subjects and paid him tribute money. At least they don't get into all the ghastly details of that the books of Samuel did. David also destroyed the forces of Hadad-ezer, king of Zobah, as far as Hamath, when Hadad-ezer marched out to strengthen his control along the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He crippled all the chariot horses except enough for 100 chariots. When Arameans from Damascus arrived to help King Hadad-ezer, David killed 22,000 of them. Then he placed several army garrisons in Damascus, the Aramean capital, and the Arameans became David's subjects and paid him tribute money. So the Lord made David victorious wherever he went. David brought the gold shields of Hadad-ezer's officers to Jerusalem, along with a large amount of bronze from Hadad-ezer's towns of Tebah and Kun. Later, Solomon melted the bronze and molded it into the great bronze basin called the sea, the pillars, and the various bronze articles used at the temple. When King Toi of Hamath heard that David had destroyed the entire army of King Hadad-ezer of Zobah, he sent his son Joram to congratulate King David for his successful campaign. Hadad-ezer and Toi had been enemies and were often at war. Joram presented David with many gifts of gold, silver, and bronze. King David dedicated all these gifts to the Lord, along with the silver and gold he had taken from the other nations, from Edom, Moab, Ammon, Philistia, and Amalek. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, that was a brother to Joab, destroyed 18,000 Edomites in the valley of Salt. He placed army garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became David's subjects. In fact, the Lord made David victorious wherever he went. And it is narratives like this that lead us to believe that the extent of Israel's territory and influence was larger under David than under any of the subsequent kings, or the previous kings for that matter. So David reigned over all Israel and did what was just and right for all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was commander of the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the royal historian. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abiathar, were the priests. Sariah was the court secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was captain of the king's bodyguard. And David's son served as the king's chief assistants. And we're moving quickly because a lot of this we've already covered, so we're familiar with the stories, and we're just kind of looking for places where this is a little different. And here's now a story that's going to be familiar. Sometime after this, King Nahash of the Ammonites died. Now, Nahash was the one who had threatened Jabesh-Gilead and had threatened to put out the people's, or one of the people, one eye on each person there. And they said, well, wait and let us see if we can find help. Well, Saul came to their aid and defeated Nahash. So Nahash and Saul became enemies. Well, under the line of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, Nahash and David became friends because David was Saul's enemy. David ultimately replaced Saul. He didn't defeat him. The Philistines did that, but from Nahash's view, David may have had a hand in it, so David and Nahash were friends. David said, I'm going to show loyalty to Hanan because his father Nahash was always loyal to me. So David sent messengers to express sympathy to Hanan about his father's death. But when David's ambassadors arrived in the land of Ammon, the Ammonite commander said to Hanan, you really think these men are coming here to honor your father? No. David sent them to spy out the land so they can come in and conquer it. Yeah. So Hanan seized David's ambassadors and shaved them, cut off their robes at the buttocks, and sent them back to David in shame. When David heard what had happened to the men, he sent messengers to tell them, stay at Jericho until your beards grow out and then come back. for they felt deep shame because of their appearance. When the people of Ammon realized how seriously they had angered David, Hanun and the Ammonites sent 75,000 pounds of silver to hire chariots and charioteers from Aram Naharaim, Aram Maacah, and Zobah. They also hired 32,000 chariots and secured the support of King Maacah and his army. These forces camped at Medeba, where they were joined by the Ammonite troops that Hanun had recruited from his own towns. When David heard about this, he sent Joab and his warriors, all his warriors, to fight them. The Ammonite troops came out and drew up their battle lines at the entrance of the city, while the other kings positioned themselves to fight in the open fields. When Joab saw that he would have to fight both the front and the rear, he chose some of Israel's elite troops and placed them under his personal command to fight the Arameans in the fields. He left the rest of the army under the command of his brother Abishai, who was to attack the Ammonites. "If the Arameans are too strong for me, then come over and help me," Joab told his brother. "And if the Ammonites are too strong for you, I will help you. Be courageous. Let us fight bravely for our people and the cities of our God. May the Lord's will be done." Well, Joab wasn't particularly a devout follower of God, but if that's the kind of language you need to use to sound good to others, then he will do it. When Joab and his troops attacked, the Arameans began to run away, and when the Ammonites saw the Arameans running, they also ran from Abishai and retreated into the city. Then Joab returned to Jerusalem. Most of you know what's coming up. The Arameans now realized that they were no match for Israel, so they sent messengers and summoned additional Aramean troops from the other side of the Euphrates River. These troops were under the command of Shobach, the commander of Hadadezer's forces. When David heard what was happening, he mobilized all Israel, crossed the Jordan River, and positioned his troops in battle formation. Then David engaged the Arameans in battle, and they fought against him. But again, the Arameans fled from the Israelites. This time, David's forces killed 7,000 charioteers and 40,000 foot soldiers, including Shobach, the commander of their army. When Hadadezer's allies saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they surrendered to David and became his subjects. After that, the Arameans were no longer willing to help the Ammonites. Now recall, these young advisors to new King Hanun had told him David wants to take over the country. So they acted to be sure that that's exactly what David would do. David genuinely wanted to honor Hanun and to console him on the death of his father, and to establish a similar relationship with Hanun that he'd had with Nahash. And Hanun's men, his advisors, ruined that and brought about the very thing they were afraid of. I think you're going to find that happens to us as humans a lot. We get so focused on something that we don't want to have happen. And we focus so much of our effort on preventing that in the end we make that very thing happen. Now, this is the part of the story that even here in Chronicles they will repeat. So they're not going to whitewash this part of it. In the spring of the year, when kings normally go out to war, Joab led the Israelite army in successful attacks against the land of the Ammonites. In the process, he laid siege to the city of Rabbah, attacking and destroying it. However, David stayed behind in Jerusalem. Then David went to Rabbah and removed the crown from the king's head, and it was placed on his own head. The crown was made of gold and set with gems, and he found that it weighed 75 pounds. David took a vast amount of plunder from the city. He also made slaves of the people of Rabbah and forced them to labor with saws, iron picks, and iron axes. That is how David dealt with the people of all the Ammonite towns. Then David and all the army returned to Jerusalem. Guess what's missing there? They talked about the battle, but they didn't talk about Uriah the Hittite. They didn't talk about Bathsheba. Like I say, I think they're taking a lime-covered brush to whitewash the kings of Judah. After this, war broke out with the Philistines at Gezer as they fought. Sibbecai from Hushah killed Saph, a descendant of the giants, and so the Philistines were subdued. During another battle with the Philistines, Elhanan, son of Jair, killed Lahmi, the brother of Goliath of Gath. The handle of Lami's spear was as thick as a weaver's beam. In another battle with the Philistines at Gath, they encountered a huge man with 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in all, who was also a descendant of the giants. But when he defied and taunted Israel, he was killed by Jonathan, the son of David's brother, Shimea. These Philistines were descendants of the giants of Gath, but David and his warriors killed them. Now, before you think that that's totally imaginary, because most of us have 5 fingers on each hand and 5 toes on each foot, it is a known human genetic mutation to end up with 6 digits, at least on the feet. I saw a woman once in Colorado, and why she did this I don't know, but I went to the house where she was invited over for Sabbath dinner, and during that time she took off her shoes, or she was wearing hose, so her toes were in, hose or stockings, but that's somewhat transparent and you could see through it. And I did my best not to stare, but she had 6 toes on each foot. I don't remember counting the fingers. I don't think she had 6 fingers on each hand, but I know she had 6 toes on each foot. So it does happen. So he was a descendant of the giants. But when he defied and taunted Israel, he was killed by Jonathan, the son of David's brother Shimea. These Philistines were descendants of the giants of Gath, but David and his warriors killed them. Now, this is interesting, and I think I mentioned this when we got to this part of Second Samuel. It's in 2 Samuel, yes. Satan, that's Hebrew for the accuser, rose up against Israel and caused David to take a census of the people of Israel. Now, in Samuel, 2 Samuel, and let me look that up. I'll read it to you right here out of the NIV. Yes, 2 Samuel 24. Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go and take a census of Israel and Judah." So the books of Samuel say God did it. Well, that is the typical Hebrew understanding at the time. If it happened, God did it. So if David decided to number the armies of Israel, it was God who led him to do it, and that must have meant that God was angry with Israel. But here it says that the accuser, or Satan, did this. Well, why doesn't 2 Samuel say that? Well, as you read through the Old Testament, you get an idea of the slowly expanding understanding of the Hebrew people. Up until the time of Isaiah, there was no concept of an enemy of God. Now, some say that Moses penned the book of Job, and so if that's the case, then the people would have had access to the book of Job. But again, Satan just means the accuser, so they read about an accuser in heaven, and it probably doesn't click with them that this has anything to do with what's going on the earth today. But now, after the captivity, the Israelites are beginning to get a sense of this and are beginning to see that God doesn't do all these things. Now, that's not a totally positive view of God, but it's better than what they had before. And so now, after the captivity, when the chroniclers set out to write the history of Judah, they can say it wasn't God that did it, it was the accuser that did it, the liar in chief. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the army, take a census of all the people of Israel, from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north, and bring me a report so I might know how many there are. But Joab replied, may the Lord increase the number of his people 100 times over. But why, my lord the king, do you want to do this? Are they not all your servants? Why must you cause Israel to sin? Well, let's stop and think for a moment. Was Joab worried about sin? By this point in time, he had killed 2 men better than him who should have taken his place as commanders of the army of Israel. He killed them in order to maintain his position. Joab does not care about sin. That's not his issue. Joab cares about Joab. And what the king is telling him to do is going to take him a long time and a lot of work. And Joab is like every other human being, occasionally lazy. He doesn't want to do it. So he brings out all the arguments he can think of, including sin, trying to get out of it. But the king insisted that they take the census, so Joab traveled throughout all Israel to count the people. Then he returned to Jerusalem and reported the number of people to David. There were 1,100,000 warriors in all Israel who could handle a sword, and 470,000 in Judah. But Joab did not include the tribes of Levi and Benjamin in the census because he was so distressed at what the king had made him do. In other words, he was lazy. He didn't want to do it, and he did enough to make David think he'd done it, but he left a little bit out. God, the writers of Chronicles say, was very displeased with the census, and he punished Israel for it. Then David said to God, I have sinned greatly by taking this census. Please forgive my guilt for doing this foolish thing. Then the Lord spoke to Gad, David's seer. This was the message. Go and say to David, this is what the Lord says. I will give you 3 choices. Choose one of these punishments, and I will inflict it on you. So Gad came to David and said, these are the choices the Lord has given you. You may choose 3 years of famine, 3 months of destruction by the sword of your enemies, or 3 days of severe plague, as the angel of the Lord brings devastation throughout the land of Israel. Decide what answer I should give to the Lord who sent me. I'm in a desperate situation, David replied to Gad, but let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is very great. Do not let me fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a plague upon Israel, and 70,000 people died as a result. And God sent an angel to destroy Jerusalem. But just as the angel was preparing to destroy it, the Lord relented and said to the death angel, stop, that is enough. Now, we know who the death angel was. It's the very agent who started this to begin with, named at the very beginning of this chapter. Satan rose up against Israel, it says. So now he's taking advantage of what he's caused to attempt to destroy Israel. But then God steps in and says, stop, that's enough. Or as it says in the book of Job, hitherto shalt thou come and no further, here shall thy proud waves be stayed. And that's speaking metaphorically to the sea. That's what's given that command in the book of Job. But the sea was the realm of the unknown, of the feared, and it could easily be used to represent the forces opposed to God. At that moment, the angel, it says here of the Lord, this angel, was standing by the threshing floor of Araunah of the Jebusite. David looked up and saw the angel standing between heaven and earth with his sword drawn, reaching out over Jerusalem. In other words, he didn't quit. He was told to stop, but he didn't leave. He couldn't do anything because God stopped him, but he still looking and lusting after Jerusalem. So David and all the leaders of Israel put on burlap to show their deep distress and fell face down on the ground. And David said to God, I'm the one who called out for the census. I'm the one who has sinned and done wrong, but these people are as innocent as sheep. What have they done? O Lord my God, let your anger fall against me and my family, but do not destroy your people. Then the angel of the Lord told Gad to instruct David to go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up to do what the Lord had commanded him through Gad. Araunah, who was busy threshing wheat at the time, turned and saw the angel there. His 4 sons who were with him ran away and hid. Well, I don't know. If you saw Satan carrying a sword, would you run away and hide? I don't think that's any big deal. When Araunah saw David approaching, he left his threshing floor and bowed before David with his face to the ground. David said to Araunah, let me buy this threshing floor you at its full price. Then I will build an altar to the Lord there so that he will stop the plague. Take it, my lord the king, and use it as you wish, Araunah said to David. I will give the oxen for the burnt offerings, and the threshing boards for wood to build a fire on the altar, and the wheat for the grain offering. I'll give it all to you. But King David replied to Araunah, no, I insist on buying it for the full price. I will not take what is yours and give it to the Lord. I will not present burnt offerings that have cost me nothing. So David gave Araunah 600 pieces of gold in payment for the threshing floor. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and peace offerings. And when David prayed, the Lord answered him by sending fire from heaven to burn up the offering on the altar. Then the Lord spoke to the angel who put the sword back into its sheath. All right? You have to leave. I've stopped you. You've been sitting here lusting. Don't lust anymore. You need to leave. And if God tells Satan to do something, he has to do it, as much as he doesn't want to. When David saw that the Lord had answered his prayer, he offered sacrifices there at Araunah's threshing floor. At that time, the tabernacle of the Lord and the altar of burnt offering that Moses had made in the wilderness were located at the place of worship in Gibeon, but David was not able to go there to inquire of God because he was terrified by the drawn sword of the angel of the Lord, the angel of death that had done all this. Now, it's quite clear that this threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite is the Temple Mount as we know it today. There are some that believe that this is also the location of Mount Moriah, where Abraham found the ram to offer in place of his son Isaac. And in fact, in Islamic tradition, it wasn't Isaac who was about to be offered, but Ishmael, and that is why the Dome of the Rock, as they call it, the mosque that they have built there, is such an important place to them, because that's where Ishmael was rescued. And they have control of it to this day. So, we might have time for just one more chapter. Then David said, this will be the location for the temple of the Lord God and the place of the altar for Israel's burnt offerings. So David gave orders to call together the foreigners living in Israel, and he assigned them the task of preparing finished stone for building the temple of God. David provided large amounts of iron for the nails that would be needed for the doors in the gates and for the clamps, and he gave more bronze than could be weighed. He also provided innumerable cedar logs for the men of Tyre and Sidon, and had brought vast amounts of cedar to David. David said, my son Solomon is still young and inexperienced, and since the temple to be built for the Lord must be a magnificent structure, famous and glorious throughout the world, I will begin making preparations for it now. So David collected vast amounts of building materials before his death. Then David sent for his son Solomon and instructed him to build a temple for the Lord, the God of Israel. My son, I wanted to build a temple to honor the name of the Lord my God, David told him. But the Lord said to me, you have killed many men in the battles you have fought. And since you have shed so much blood in my sight, you will not be the one to build a temple to honor my name. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace. I will give him peace with his enemies and all the surrounding lands. His name will be Solomon, and I will give peace and quiet to Israel during his reign. He is the one who will build a temple to honor my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father, and I will secure his throne, the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. Now, my son, may the Lord be with you and give you success as you follow his directions in building the temple of the Lord your God. And may the Lord give you wisdom and understanding, that you may obey the law of the Lord your God as you rule over Israel. For you will be successful if you carefully obey the decrees and regulations the Lord gave to Israel through Moses. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or lose heart. And again, this reflects the approach that God was taking in leading humanity from their terribly fallen, broken condition into unity with himself. And at this point in time, that did involve this rule-focused culture, because that was the level of their moral development. That's what they could understand. So while in our day we say these rules are not helpful in bringing us to God, at the time, that's where the people were, and that's how God worked through it. And so David reflects that as he gives these instructions to his son Solomon. I have worked hard to provide materials for building the temple of the Lord. Nearly 4,000 tons of gold, 40,000 tons of silver, and so much iron and bronze that it cannot be weighed. I have also gathered timber and stone for the walls, though you may need to add more. You have a large number of skilled stonemasons and carpenters and craftsmen of every kind. You have expert goldsmiths and silversmiths and workers of bronze and iron. Now begin the work, and may the Lord be with you. Now, this passage in 1 Chronicles is the only reference we have to why God didn't want David to build the temple. And that is right here in verse 8. But the Lord said to me, you have killed many men in the battles you have fought, and since you have shed so much blood in my sight, you will not be the one to build a temple to honor my name. That's it, one verse. I think it does reflect a slightly better understanding of God by the people who prepared these narratives. But we know that even then they had a long way to go. Then David ordered all the leaders of Israel to assist Solomon in this project. The Lord your God is with you, he declared. He has given you peace with surrounding nations. He has handed them over to me, and they are now subject to the Lord and his people. Now, seek the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. Build the sanctuary of the Lord God so that you can bring the ark of the Lord's covenant and the holy vessels of God into the temple built to honor the Lord's name. And in the footnotes here it says Solomon sounds like, and is probably derived from, the Hebrew word for peace, or shalom. And then it has those conversions there from the Hebrew units to the units that they use in this translation. And I'm looking at our time, and I think we've run about the time we need to. Again, I apologize for not being able to go live. I had hoped to. That didn't work out. So this will be available when we get it uploaded, although I may try again to go live here once I get done with this, just to see if I can't figure out what went wrong. But at any rate, I do need to get it uploaded pretty soon. So we will continue, and we didn't finish 1 Chronicles. We did about 10 chapters, I guess. We'll continue in 1 Chronicles, maybe get into 2 Chronicles next week in our Friday night Bible study. And until next Friday night, when we invite you to join us again, we do say goodbye and God bless.
Bye, everyone.